Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Code Together Hour of Code. Today we are visiting the WPF user interface world for a quick and dirty introduction to the MVVM pattern, and specifically how we use that in WPF. So MVVM stands for model view model, and it's the idea that you want to separate your UI logic from your business logic as much as possible, which is always a good idea. You should always do this, and this particular pattern lets you do that in a particular way that you get reactivity. So, for example, when your business logic updates your view model, then you can make the UI automatically update and reflect that. You don't need to manually set oh, this field should update. That's like the gains of this. So what I have here, this is just a completely standard WPF. I have a project, I just created it. It has no additional code except the template, meaning we have a main window. It looks like this. This is completely standard, just has an empty grid. And I guess we'll just get started. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create our view model. And what a view model is, it's literally just a class. So I will call mine main window view model. That's what I'm going to call mine. And I'll just make it public to be safe. I don't think that's technically needed. Actually, let's be proper here. Let's make it internal so that it's only visible in this project. And then once we have this, we can now use this here. So what we do is, if you haven't done WPF before, this part here is the important part. This is just a preview. The important stuff goes on in the window here. And we have this window XML object here. That's like the most important one. So inside this one, we can create a new one called window data context. This will bind the window's so-called data context field to an instance of our view model. So I'll just create main window view model, right? And once again, this is XML, so this is how we write that. It's saying it doesn't exist. I think we just need to compile and it should find it. Yeah. Enable that. Okay, thank you, IntelliCode. So now it finds it, and this is good because what this means is now Visual Studio will inspect this view model. It will look at the properties in there.
Sorry,
and it will.
How did you compile it?
Sorry, what?
How did you compile it?
Build solution.
Oh, okay, sure.
Like normal. Nothing special here. It's like this is completely normal C#, right?
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. So now, whenever we can remove that, whenever we add a property here, we will be able to see that when we try to bind things to it, right? Because now suddenly WPF is aware of the connection between the view model and the view. Did I hear a question? No? Okay. Now, one thing I should let you know, I'm a pure backend developer, right? I do backend at work. I have made WPF applications, but I always had someone else do the visuals for me. Meaning I am far from a XAML wizard. I know my way around it enough to make something that looks terrible, but is good enough to demonstrate what we're going to do. So to start out, I'm just going to make a really, really terrible user interface. I'll make something that has a two-way binding. So that we can see that. I'll basically, let's add a label that we can update by pressing a button. And then maybe we'll actually add a text field where you can input some stuff as well, and then that gets transferred somewhere else.
Just a question. What is two-way binding? Because I don't know anything about WPF.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'll get into that. So just keep going, and you'll see. So let's change grid here to a stack panel, which is my preferred layout component. It's easier to work with. I can basically just add things now, and they will start appearing in the window in the order I specify them here. I don't get to like, this is not like WinForms, right? So you can't drag and drop, or rather you can, but please don't do that. It's terrible. The XAML it generates is truly awful and will break. So I'm just going to add a label. So what does a label do? Well, it lets me add, like, text of my own. So I'll just say, hello WPF, right? That's my label. I will add a button. I'll put content, that's like the text. So I'll say, click me. We will add a text box. We should all be aware what text box is, right? It's the one you type in. So we'll give it some default text. So we can say, write stuff here. I like having a space here. I know it's not enforced, but I like it. And then finally, let's have another label. This is the one we'll finally put some stuff in. And just to make this one stick out a little bit, we'll give it a background and a border. And maybe a border brush. Look at that, beautiful, by some definition of beautiful. So let's just make sure that that works. So we run it. Yep, here we go. It's absolutely terrible and awful, but you can write stuff here, and we have the labels, and we have the button. But obviously, none of these things do anything, right? We've just created a label, we created a text box. I can write here, but it's not connected to anything. And I can click here, but nothing happens. And now we need to start connecting the things we have here to things. But before we can connect anything, we need to have something for them to connect to, and that's where the view model comes in. So the very first thing we do, so I said hello WPF here, right? Let's leave that. Let's make that empty. Let's just make an empty label here first. And I'll say instead I want to make that be populated from the view model. So I'll make a property here. I'll make a string property called greeting, which I will default to hello code together. All right, so completely normal C#. This is just a property that has a default value, right? Nothing curious going on here. Now back here in the label, I will do content again, but instead of writing a value, I will put some brackets, some squigglies. We had a curly braces. That's what we decided to call them, right? And in here, you can type some things. You can type a lot of things, as you can see, but the one we're interested in is binding. This lets us bind this value to something else. So binding has a path parameter, and you can already see it's suggesting greeting. It's saying, hey, you should probably type greeting here. And that means when this code runs, this property will bind to the greeting variable. So if I run this, you'll see that it says hello code together in the label. This is by default a one-way binding. This means that the user interface is bound to that property. If that property would change and alert the user interface that it has changed, it would update. But we can't update the view model from the user interface. So if for example, if I were to bind, I can bind this one, right? So this one is now bound, but I can copy this binding and I can put this in my text as well, like in my text box. I'm going to bind the text box to the exact same thing, right? We run that too. And it says hello code together. But as I type here, you'll see that, oh, look, it actually updated. So it updates when I lose focus on the text box. So I type something, and then if I just click outside, in this case, it's only the button I can go to force an update. But it actually binds. So maybe they've changed that. That used to not be available. For that to work, previously you had to specify the binding mode. Or actually, I think it might work because the user interface is bound to both of them, so that I think WPF is smart enough to realize that I have two things bound to the same thing. So it will just connect them automatically. But I didn't actually want this one here. Like that was just a sample. We just want the top one to be bound to the greeting. For buttons, it's slightly different. WPF has this concept called the command. So what you want to do, if you want to bind a button to do something, you would bind it to a command. And this is where it gets a little bit complicated. Because unfortunately, like there are a few default commands. I don't remember where they are, which ones they are, because I don't very rarely use them. And they're usually not very interesting. Because most of the time what you want your command to do is run some arbitrary code, right? Maybe I'll make a method, I'll have my private void on button click, and like what happens in here, this is what I want to happen when maybe the greeting will change, right? So greeting will be like the button was clicked. That's what I want to happen when I click the button. But I can't, like if we go out
Sorry,
here.
one question. Shouldn't your greeting say one reference because you're referencing it in stack panel, right?
No. Well, no.
Oh, that's from your button, but
yeah. No, but like no, it doesn't. That's because Visual Studio, like this is a code reference.
okay.
I'm just so XAML is not C#, right? So Visual Studio analyzes your CS code and like tracks the reference, but the binding doesn't count as a reference yeah. Okay. So but this is just a Visual Studio thing. It's not related to the code itself. But that's fine. Solid question though. Like yeah. Where were I? Yeah, right. So yeah, we want to bind this, right? On button click. So if we go out here and we do command, because it has a property called command, and that's like what you normally bind. Right? So you do binding, and it's called path as usual. And you see that I just have greeting here. Okay, I can't bind to. Well, I mean, maybe it's because we made it private, right? Let's make it public. See if that helps. Can we bind to it then? We still can't bind to it. Curious, right? If I type that in, I think we'll get a binding error. If we click start here, like play, we get a binding error. It says here, binding failure. On button click property not found on object. Ah, god damn it. So yeah, because you need to bind to what's called properties. You can't bind to a method. So how do we do that? Like, because I really that's what I want to do. I mean, there was the click thing here, right? There was a property called click. Binding. Oh no, wait, yeah, sorry, that was command. There's a click property here as well, where you can make an event handler, right? But this is not the MVVM way. We're going to use a command. So I'll make the binding thing here, but I can't put any good value here in path because I haven't created something that matches. I need to bind this to my on-button click command. So let's make that. Let's make the on-button click command, right? It needs to be a property, and it needs to be of a certain type. So we'll make a prop, and it needs to be an I command from the system.windows.input namespace. And I'll make it on-button click command. Now I can bind it. But now I need to make when this is invoked, this is just an interface, right? So I need a concrete declaration here. I need to assign a value to this that makes this button work. This is where MVVM comes in. So MVVM is not a new pattern. It's been around for a long time, and there are plenty of support frameworks for this. My favorite one is called the Community Toolkit. I'm gonna quickly show it to you because it's really good. It's on GitHub, and it's not made by Microsoft, but they They embrace it. They like publicly link to it and say this is awesome, you should use this. But it's not technically made by Microsoft. It's this one, Windows Community Toolkit here. This is really good. It has lots of help things for UWP and the MVVM here. So they provide base classes, but we're not going to use this today. I'm actually going to do things from scratch so you can see what happens in the background. So what we need is we need our own implementation of iCommand that lets us relay a click to another method. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to make a constructor. And then in my constructor, I will say that on button click command equals new relay command on button click. Now, obviously, we have some errors here, right? Because there is no such thing. I'm going to make a folder. I'll call it core. And this is where I will put the things that are MVVM fundamentals. Things that like allow us to work with MVVM better. For example, relay command. So public class relay command inherits from iCommand. And then we just go here and we say using core. Now we need to, we can generate a constructor. Perfect. So now we're going to implement this thing here. A lot of this, some of this stuff is going to be like a little bit weird. That's fine, right? Don't be too alarmed. So what I'm going to take in, I'm going to take in an action called execute, and I'm going to take in an action, actually a predicate over object. Because I realized that this actually needs to be over object, all of them, because technically you can send in parameters to your functions. This is just to fulfill the interface. As you see, the interface here expects you to take objects. You could make a relay command that doesn't take in like action over objects. That's fine too. But we'll do the basic one for now. So what we need to do here is we need to make sure that execute is not null. Like if execute is null, then we can't really continue. So we'll just throw new argument null exception. And what I'm doing here, this syntax might look weird to you. I'm doing underscore equals execute, question mark, throw new argument null exception. This is sort of like the new de facto standard way of doing this. It does exactly the same thing as if execute, is null, or, and you could write that as if execute equals null. These are also equivalent. They do the exact same thing. They don't do the exact same thing if the value you're comparing to is not null, by the way. So be warned about that. Throw new la 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 la. It's the exact same thing. I just this is what we do at work, so I'm just used to typing it like this. Okay. So otherwise, we have to assign execute to execute, and we will generate a read-only field for that. I'll do the same for can execute. Sorry,
Why don't you assign it straight away?
What do you mean?
Instead of underscore, you can just assign it.
I still don't follow your line of thinking.
17 string, you have underscore equals, you can put the underscore execute equals execute question mark, and so on.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Like I could do that. Oh, as long as I spell correctly. Yeah. That is true. I didn't think of that. That's true. Yeah, like I said, right, it's just a null checking pattern. I'm so used to doing that, so that's what I do. But this will do the exact same thing, right? So it will try to assign this, but if execute is actually null, it will instead throw an exception. We also need to implement these two, and then we need to implement this event here. So I'll start by implementing execute. So this is pretty straightforward. We know that this won't be null, so we can just do something along the lines of execute.invoke parameter. I'm just saying, like, so when you call this method, I just want you to call the action that we stored. And I want to do roughly the same thing for can execute. It's just that can execute can be null. So we'll do a question mark invoke. What the question mark means is like, what happens if it's null? Well, then we just return true. Because basically what I want to happen is, like, if you don't specify a can execute method for this, I want you to always be able to execute. The default is that you can always execute. So you can use relay command in two ways. You can use it with can execute, or you can use it without, and then it will just always try to execute. Now we just need to fix this thing. So events are interesting properties because you can do this. So we need to command manager dot let me just quickly look up what I had there. It's requery suggested plus equals value. And then you can do the same for remove, but we remove it instead. So this is basically what provides the reactivity. It basically, like, sometimes this is WPF stuff, right? So WPF will try to check if a command should be requeried. What this means, for example, is if you specify a can execute, you can automatically turn on and off a button. Like if a button is connected to a command and the command says, I cannot execute right now, then the button will turn gray. You can't even click the button. You get that for free, so to speak. I can show that later on as well. But I think relay command looks pretty good now. I'm pretty happy with this. We just need to... Right, it's complaining because this doesn't take an object in. In this case, we don't need the parameter. We just need this to fulfill the relay command specification. Like I said, we could have made a relay command that doesn't take in an object, but it gets a little bit hacky. It's fine. Like I said, we might do that later as well, just to clean things up a bit. But this is fine for now. Now, if we go back to the XAML file, this binding will work, and it will even say, hey, this is an I command. So now if we write some code here, well, we actually have some code here, right? We reassign the greeting. So if you run this, that should work. We should be able to click the button, and it should change the greeting. So let's try. Okay. That was not expected. We don't have anything weird going on, do we? Let's terminate. Let's rebuild to make sure that it works and try again. There we go. It just, yeah. So now if we click here, we should see a greeting changed. Ah, but it didn't update. Maybe because of two things. One, we didn't notify the user interface that this property has changed. And also, actually, that's the only thing that's wrong right now. We didn't notify. We need to tell the system that greeting has changed. So let's do that. So to do that, we need to re-implement this property a little bit. We'll just, we'll just point this to. We'll make a not read only, just a private string greeting, and then for set we will call set property greeting to value. Actually, I'll put a ref here. So now I'm gonna make this method, but I'm gonna make this as like a base class because this will be like my view model base or base view model. I'll call it view model base. Let's make this public as well. I need to implement a certain interface on this. That interface is called INotify property changed from system.component model. And then we will make main view model inherit from my base. And I will make a set property like this. And then I'm going to pull that up into my base class. This needs to be protected. So this event here is really important. And this interface in general is really important to WPF, because this is how we let WPF know when something has changed. And how we do that is using usually something like this method here called onPropertyChanged. And it needs to take in a string. We'll call it property name. We'll take in a property so that we can like tell WPF that this is what changed. So anything bound to this needs to update. And this is pretty simple. We just do an arrow, and I'll say property changed, which is this event up here. If you have anything, invoke. I can't spell today. Invoke. We need to send in a sender. That's going to be this. And then we just make a new property changed event args, and we pass in the property name. So now I don't have to use this immediately. I can actually use this to show you, and then it will refactor it to use set property. So basically, let's say that set property doesn't exist for now. We'll make it later. So what I can do instead of this, right? I'll just comment this out, this entire setter. We'll make a new setter, and we'll say on property changed. We can pass in greeting. So this is how we let the system know that this property has changed. And then we say greeting equals value, right? Completely standard setter. So now, when this happens, right, where this method is going to fire, it's going to let the system know that greeting has changed. So anything bound to greeting should re-render. So now let's try the same thing again. Let's try clicking the button, and it says the button was clicked. So now WPF saw the change because we let everyone who is listening know that, hey, something has changed in this view model. In this case, it was this property. Now, having to do this is a little bit obnoxious, right? That's where this comes in. This is much nicer, if you ask me. I want to be able to just say set property, and then this is the field, this is the value, one line of code. I don't want to have to type in the name of the thing that's changing, right? And lucky for me, there's a way to do that. I'm going to show you. Because what we can do up here, we can say in system.runtime.compiler services, there's an attribute called caller member name. Because yes, you can put attributes on fields and arguments and stuff like that as well. And this means that if this value is not provided, it should take it from the caller. Meaning, like, if I have a method called, my button click, then this string will be my button click. And if it's called from a property, it will put the property name. So this will be greeting with a capital G when I call it from there. And we can do the exact same thing down here. We can just take this, copy this, and put that here. And then, actually this should be, let's make a real body here. And this should also be a bool, by the way, not a void. We want to let people know if something, if the property change went through or not. And also it needs to be generic, because we want this to work for anything. So this should not be called greeting, of course, because we don't want it tied to that. It's just the field that we want to update. So we're basically going to say, like, if I'm going to, yeah, since it's generic, we can't really compare things. We're going to have to use this equality comparer to check if things are equal or not. This is just a little bit tedious because it's generic, but this, like I said, this is boilerplate. You write this once and then it works forever. And most of the time you won't even need to write this yourself. You can use this from a toolkit. But this will just say that if the value is already equal to the thing you're trying to set it to, then we don't need to notify anyone that the property has changed, because it hasn't really changed. You're trying to set it to the exact same value. However, otherwise, we do let it know that it changed. And we then set the value. And we return true. So now set property does something slightly more realistic, right? Like it will do the thing we did before. It will call on property changed and it will change the value. But it will only do this if the value has actually changed. Let's clean this up. Thank you. So that's view model base. Done. We're technically done with that now. We don't need to model that anymore. And relay command is also working. So now let's let's first show that this still works, right? Because we changed the set property. So I can click and nothing happens. Interesting. What did I do wrong? Let's quickly look up what I could have done wrong. Let's see. We set up the relay command correctly. Yup. That looks pretty good to me.
I may have an idea of what what maybe didn't work. Can you show us again the code in set property?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe the reason is maybe you should first set the field and then call on property changed. Could it be the reason?
No. That doesn't matter. Rather it shouldn't. Like, and if I looked up the source code for, well, now it works, so that's weird. Just for the record, I wrote this exact code previously during the warm up, and then I had them in the other order, and it worked. I think maybe it was just something else. No? Huh. That's really interesting. But yeah, let's do that this way then, for sure. I guess it actually technically makes sense, right? We change the value and then we tell things that, hey, the value has changed. So if it's listening really fast, then it will tell. Oh. Good catch, good suggestion. Okay, so now we have that working. Now let's tie this up a little bit, right? Because we said we have this label up here, and we have a text box here, and we have another label down here. So what I want to do is, like, when I click the button, I want it to say, if you type in your name here and you click, so let's see, yeah, let's change the order. Let's move the button down and say, we'll just remove this binding as well. We'll say here to type your name below, and then we'll say text equals. So that's going to be a binding. Path is going to be to a property that we'll call name. And this is what I spoke about modes. You see, we have a mode. So there's a default mode, there's a one-time mode, which I'm not really sure what that does. And then there's a one-way to source, and two-way. So two-way means that, like, you can update the model and the model can update you. And that's what we want in this case. And then click me will do something. and then label will be updated, right? So we need this to, we need to bind this. So we'll do text, nope, not template, text equals. It's being annoying today. Wait, why isn't this working? Oh, because it's called content in labels, of course. Binding path, we'll use the greeting variable for this. So we'll bind this to greeting. So now, if we go into the view model, we will have to make a property for name, of course. So we'll make a prop string name. And if we're not going to update this through code, we don't need the set property stuff. It can just be like this. If we just want to let the user interface update this so that we can read it, then this is fine. So what we'll do here, we'll say that we'll change this one to be hello name exclamation mark. Let's give that a spin, right? So type your name below. Well, my name is Pobiega. So I'm going to click and it says hello Pobiega. Would you look at that? So this is like the simplest possible MVVM example you can make, right? Like you have, we've demonstrated how to update things through code and make the user interface respect that, like this. Hello Pobiega. I've shown how to feed information from the user interface into the view model with the text button, and I've shown how to do buttons. Using this, you can build some pretty advanced stuff. Like you can at least do anything you can do in WinForms. But I don't really recommend making your own view model based on your own relay command. I would recommend that you use a toolkit, kind of like this one. So for example, if you go in here, input, you'll see that they have relay command, they have relay command T, they have async relay command, so you can do asynchronicity as well. And this is it basically does the same thing we did. It's just a little bit more verbose, right? It's better documented, but it does the same things. Their base model is called observable object. And it does a lot more things. They also have an on-property changing. So like they let people know that before something changes, and then it changes then, and then they let it know after it has changed. And the benefit of using something like this is that, like, for example, they also have, right here, like they have a way to make this work with dependency injection. Because if you've hung around here for a while, you probably know that like in .NET we use dependency injection almost everywhere. But not a single time, right? If you look at my view model, I never actually like we have like, yeah, this is just my constructor, right? I never call the constructor. I never anywhere do I write like, you know, var something equals main view model, you know, make a new. I never instantiate my own this. This doesn't happen, and that's because WPF does that. Because in the XAML code here, right, I specified that my data context is this model. This will instantiate it for it when the XAML parser looks at this code. Now, that might get a little bit like, so then how do you get dependencies into your view model, for example, if you need that? What if you, like, when you click a button, you actually want to call, you know, have a service? Maybe you previously made a service class, like maybe an even class library, right, full of service classes that let you talk to your favorite website using an API or whatever, like whatever, right? There's the thing. We want to, if we have written a good piece of code before, like a library, we should be able to use it from a console application, a WPF application, maybe even a web application, and we shouldn't have to change the core at all. We shouldn't have to change the core almost at all, like or at all. It's just the bindings into it, like how do we interact with this? So we'll call into that library. But then you might need to use dependency injection because, like, that's very standard. And there are you can do that. Like I have done that once before. That was a year ago or so, where I was curious on how it worked, so I set it up myself. It was quite a lot of work. I sat for a few hours just getting dependency injection working. So it's significantly easier letting someone else do all that work for you. So use one of the MVVM toolkits out there if you are going to make something bigger with this, where you need dependency injection. Otherwise, if you don't need dependency injection, you can just, let the view model, like for example, you can make an HTTP call from the view model. That's fine. If it's a small application, that's okay. But the whole idea of MVVM is that you separate your front end logic from your actual business logic, right? So this is just my design. This is like how things look, and I specify like what happens when I click a button or what property is connected to what. Here is where I specify all my view logic. So like, yeah, what actually happens when you click that button? Well, this method is called, and then I write code here. And that code might have called like, I could have had like some Pokemon service, right, or greeter service, and it could call the method into that. And then that's when you get into dependency injection territory. You're gonna start having dependencies. The beautiful thing about doing this is, like, for example, your view model is entirely testable, right? This is just a normal class. In my case, inheriting from view model base, but there's nothing fancy going on here. This is testable. You can create unit tests for this to make sure that this works. You can even like use the fact that this, like, you can set up tests that verify your reactivity, the notify property change thing, that gets fired with the correct values and stuff like that. So I guess something that might be worth mentioning then is like, why would you? This is so much more complicated than WinForms, right? In WinForms, you just drag a button out, you double click the button, and you write the code you want. And there's some merit to that, right? Like, some people say like, why do people even bother using WinForms anymore? Because WinForms is simple. It's simple, it's straightforward, you click the button, the things happen. It's great. However, it does lead to more coupled code. And like the more advanced your things grow, like the more advanced your code base grows, the less coupling you want. Like you really do want to keep coupling low for many, many reasons. And a properly implemented view model will really allow you to decouple your business logic from your view almost entirely, which is really helpful. And WinForms is basically not getting any updates anymore. They will only be making security fixes to it. Essentially, they're saying, if you want to make desktop applications, please use WPF or UWP. And I, for one, I'm not a huge fan of the UWP looks, so I prefer WPF. Not that I make a lot of desktop apps. Like I said, I'm a pure backend person, but still. So yeah, I hope this was informative and that this will help you get started on the challenge for this month. I know there's only a few days left. I did try to get this session out earlier, but there's a lot of things going on in my life right now. So yeah, best of luck if you choose to make a WPF application for this month's challenge. Are there any questions?
I have a remark.
Yeah.
Actually, guys, if you have mastered this concept of MVVM and how the things work in WPF, it could be really easy for you to make Xamarin apps because the API is almost the same.
Yep, that's true. Xamarin, which, by the way, with .NET 6 coming in November, right, which is soon, we're getting Xamarin 2.0, sort of, which is called MAUI, multiple application something platform UI. It's the new Xamarin, and that also uses XAML, and they also use view models, like, very heavily. And using Xamarin or MAUI, you can make a web page, a desktop app, which is or a mobile app, and they will be multi-platform, right? You can run it on Linux, you can run it on a Mac, you can run it on, like I said, a web page. Like it's all one interface, which is going to be really cool. I, for one, am really looking forward to it. I've looked at Xamarin before, but Xamarin is pretty old, right? It even existed back with Framework, where you ran a mono runtime and stuff like that. And I think it's going to be really cool to see that Microsoft has revisited it and like almost redone it from scratch, with .NET Core being the focus technology and like really focusing on the multi-platform aspect of it. And it's going to be cool to see where C# ends up when we have a proper multi-platform interface library. So yeah, that's the end of this session. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you
So
for
is,
making that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is dependency injection not built in to WPF?
No.